Welcome to the GP Podcast, where we come together to explore topics that surround our walk with Christ. I'm your host, Dan Royal, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. The letters GP in our podcast name represent the name of our church, Grace Pointe. Our main campus is located in Naperville, Illinois, but Grace Pointe also has a campus in Plainfield. If you're curious to learn more about us, make sure to head to our website, www.gracepointe.us, and check us out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any new episodes in the future. Now, whether you're a longtime member or someone new who's interested in Grace Pointe, this podcast can be a sanctuary for you to learn more about God. Our topics will always center around the Christian faith, and each podcast will typically feature another host or guest that has a heart for and a knowledge of the topic. We'll answer questions like how to get more from your Bible study, or how to grow your small group, or what the point of baptism is, or maybe even how to work on your prayer life. But regardless of the topic, we will always aim to lead you into a deeper understanding of how Christ wants you to live your life, and how to grow in your walk with Him. Join us now as we grow in Christ together. Well, thanks for listening and joining us today. Welcome back to the GP Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Royal. We're really excited that you're here with us for another episode. Today, we're going to continue down the path of the engagement track, and we've covered that in the past with the Life Group podcast. We did another podcast on attending church, and then we did one on mission so far. We're going to continue down that track today. We're going to cover the topic of membership. Now, if you go on our website right now, and you look up at the top bar, you're going to see 4 G's. There's going to be a gather, a go, a give, and a grow. And under each one of those, there's going to be several categories. And if you're tracking with us so far, and you've heard the other podcasts, you know that we've discussed the engagement track and the 4 G's and where each of those steps in the engagement track fall. Under each of those 4 G's are 3 more categories. So you've got your total for 12 right there. And under the gather category is membership, which is what we're going to be discussing today. Membership at a church, for some people, can be confusing. Why do I need to be a member? What's the importance of it? And we discussed it a little bit in our last podcast on attendance because it kind of flows naturally where after attending a while, it would make sense to become a member. So to help us figure this out, what is membership? What's the importance of it? Why do you do it? And what's the process? We have 3 guests joining us today. The first one is Sean Bradshaw, who's an elder here at Grace Pointe, Naperville. And then we have Becca Anders. She's a new member at Grace Pointe, Plainfield, and she plays keys for them down there for the worship team. And then Daniel Hooper, who we're going to go by Hooper, if that's all right with you, just for clarity's sake. And he is our student ministry director here at Grace Pointe, Naperville. But to start us off, Sean, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more, tell us a little bit about yourself and your history and how you ended up at Grace Pointe.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time. Glad to be here with y'all.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, Mary Tyson, we have 4 kids. And so we have some in Hooper's youth group at this point. And so that's been fun. So we have a senior in high school, a freshman in high school, and twins that are in 7th grade. We've been at Grace Pointe now for about 24 years. So we've really enjoyed our time here and the relationships we've had here and just how we've been able to grow and be part of things here.
Becca, what about you? I know that you're the newest member here. What's a little bit of your story? We can dive into it a little bit more later, but give us the 40,000-foot view.
So me and my 4 kiddos started attending Grace Pointe Plainfield about a year and a half ago, nearing 2 years now. So, we just really connected there, and my kids loved the kids ministry and made quick friends, so we just felt like home, so we stayed.
Okay. And Hooper, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you end up here?
Yeah, so before I started as the student ministry director, I was a normal member, a normal person here at Grace Pointe. We started attending about 5 years ago, and like Becca, it was the children's ministry that really, drew us in here.
Okay, now that we have a voice to go with a name for everybody here, let's dive into some of these questions. First of all, Sean, I know that a lot of people hear the word membership and they think, oh, it's a club. Or like I said on the last podcast, you need a decoder ring to be a part of it, or there's a secret saying you have to do. Can you help us understand a little bit of why it's important to become a member and what the process is behind that and why it's a natural step in a Christian's walk?
Sure. Yeah, and the first part, as far as what it is and the importance of it is the Bible tells us that. And one of the things that we talk about in the membership classes or through the membership books, in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it talks about referencing the church body and the body being like the body of Christ. And so we come together to serve, to gather together and live that life. It also talks about in Acts 2 how we gather together in the early church gathered, and they lived their lives together. And so it is important to be a member from the perspective of what God's called us to do throughout Scripture. Being a member, the way I see it right now, is just simply saying, hey, you are a part of Grace Pointe at this moment in time, and you're living the life God's called you to live. It's part of the church body.
Sean, let's start with that process. What is the process of becoming a member here at Grace Pointe? Is it pretty common amongst churches how that is carried out? How do we do it here?
Yeah, so the process here to become a member, there's a membership book that each person would complete. There's two ways to complete it. So there's either a self-study in which you would do it at your own pace, your own timing, whenever you wanted to do it, or you can take a membership class. The membership class is 4 weeks, and it's in either the spring or the fall. At the conclusion of either the self-study or finishing the class, then there's a time that would be set to meet with 2 elders. And that's a great time because it's a chance for the elders to get to know you, hear your story, hear your faith journey. But it's also a time for you to ask more questions about the church, to get to know the elders. I love serving as an elder in so many ways, but it's one of my favorite things to sit down with people and get to know them and hear their story and chance to pray over them and just build that relationship.
From somebody that's never, or maybe a new Christian's standpoint, meeting with the nomenclature elders could sound scary, and it doesn't need to be, right? It's a situation where they really do just want to get to know you, get to know your story, how you got to where you are. But I think there's a faith story wrapped in there too. How does a person's testimony come into all this?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, first off, the elders, we hope we're not, and we do not intend to be intimidating by any means. We love people that's church, and we love God, and
you do.
So just to sit down. Hopefully, it's not something that's intimidated at all, but it's just to hear the story and your testimony of the walk that you've had, and a lot of it is just getting to know you more, and having the opportunity again to pray for you if there's certain things you want to pray about. But developing that relationship at the beginning, that's something that can be continuous, that as you have questions or you have needs or things that come up, you have someone that you can approach throughout the time too.
My understanding is there are certain activities that you can't do before you're a member, and then certain ones that open up once you become a member. What's kind of the reasoning behind that, and how does it work that way?
Yeah, so as far as what you're referring to as areas that you can serve or not serve potentially without being a member. Yep, so the way we look at that is more or less the people that are serving in a leadership role.
Okay.
Where we encourage them to be members.
It's an understanding that if you're going to be leading others in a Christian walk with Christ, we need to know that, not to say vetted, but that you are.
Yeah, but as a parent, if I have, if I have your kids in my youth group, to know they've been vetted, they've gone through a background check, they've been vetted, they've been not just me, but an elder, someone else, multiple people. I find comfort in that work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So essentially, as far as serving in different roles, we do have roles of leadership that we do require membership for that process. It's not to be meant to be a barrier or roadblock at all. It's meant to be something that to make sure we're on the same page and we're unified in communication. So think of roles like elders and deacons. You're going to have, if you're a small group leader, you are leading a small group. You are shepherding that small group. So that's important. For those on the worship team, you are leading the congregation in worship. So that's important. For those that are leading classes, for those that are working in children's ministry, for those that are helping in the youth group, they are leading. And so in those areas is where we require membership. And again, it's not meant to be a roadblock, but it's to make sure we're on the same page, that people have had an opportunity to go through the membership workbook. At that point, understand what the Bible tells us about church and understand the Grace Pointe statement of faith, and just to make sure there's full clarity there.
It's kind of like an accountability aspect of it, I think, because you want to make sure that those that are in leadership positions are not teaching heresy, so to speak.
Correct.
Not to go back to the days of the ancients, but essentially that you know where they're coming from, you know what their Christian walk is, what their faith story is, and you know that once they are in that position of leadership, that it's okay, they know what they're talking about, and you know that they're going to lead correctly and lead biblically. Becca, let's start with you and your story. Let's dive a little bit more into that. As a member of Grace Pointe Plainfield, I know you have some gifting in the music area, and you really wanted to plug in there, but you had to go through this process of membership. So let's back up a little bit and let's get a little bit more into your story of how you got to Plainfield and what the process was like for you to become a member. Was it scary? Was it fun? What were your takeaways?
Sure. So when we first started attending Plainfield, I felt intimidated in a new church as a single mom.
Sure.
I had a bunch of my kids, which makes me terribly busy on a Sunday morning, but it was really hard to meet people and really get to know them on a Sunday morning. And so my heart's desire was to plug in, get community, really feel like Plainfield was our family.
Yep.
And so becoming a member had been a thought, but I honestly just felt like, I'm too busy. Nothing was really kind of giving me that push to become a member.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one Sunday in the service, I actually just prayed that prayer of like, all right, Lord, I want to have open hands for what you are calling me to and the kinds of ministries you're asking me to serve in here. So just open those doors wherever you want. And at that time, I actually did not plan on trying out for the worship team. I don't know. It just wasn't really on my radar. I knew I could play the piano, but I hadn't been on a worship team in a while and I didn't have a keyboard to practice on. And so that wasn't initially why I became a member. But that same Sunday that I prayed that prayer, Mary Ann Schmidt approached me and asked if I would be willing to become a member in hopes that I could maybe teach in the kids area. And so I felt like, okay, Lord, that just seems like a clear leading, a clear open door for me to say yes. And so she got me the membership booklet and I went home. I was able to work through it on my own at home at my own pace, which was great. It's a great booklet, even just to go through for your own faith journey, right? It walks you through your own testimony and you get to answer a lot of questions that make you stop and think, what do I think about baptism and what do I think about the role of members of a church, So the booklet was great. And then the next step was attending the in-person class. And so that just looked like, I think there were maybe 5 or 6 of us who were becoming members, and then we had some elders. I think the class was maybe my favorite part just because it was so personal and I got to hear so many different testimonies, get to know people who are part of my church family, and they got to hear my story. And we worked through the book together as a group. And then after the class was over, the last part of becoming a member was to have an interview with either an elder. And that might kind of sound intimidating to some people. You have to sit down and have an interview. But really, it was just kind of confirming, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I've been baptized. And then they allow you space to ask any questions that you have about your faith, about the Bible, any concerns, that you have. Yeah. So, that was the process.
Soon after that, did you seek out getting into the worship team from there, or did you serve with the children's ministry for a while?
So how that happened, I during sharing my testimony with the group in the class, I mentioned, not intending anyone to get any ideas.
I play piano.
I mentioned that I could play the piano because I did go to college for worship arts.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know, I think it was Tom Ivonic, actually one of our elders, kind of made a mental note like, oh, she plays piano. I think it was the next Sunday. I was walking past Jess, our creative arts director, and I complimented her on her sweater, and we were just standing near each other for like 2 moments there, and Tom saw, and he just poked his head in and said, oh, by the way, Becca plays piano. And then before I knew it, I was on the team.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And my understanding is you also got to play recently at one of our conferences here.
I did, yes.
For those that are listening, we try to blend our campuses together as often as we can. So there's 1 or 2, sometimes 3 events per year. Last year's event was a missions conference. Before that, we've done a worship night kind of thing. We do get-togethers during the summer for picnics and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that as a member that you get to join in on that are fun. It's not just meeting together all the time for Bible study or meeting together for worship. There's also aspects of becoming part of a relationship with people, developing that family that you're with. And like you said, you were kind of looking for a new family that you could get plugged into. So that's really neat to see how that within a couple days of becoming a member, now you're getting plugged into where God has gifted you the most.
I would say, Becca, this is Sean. It's great to hear your story of enjoying the class and connecting with other people. And it's been fun because I've heard that repeatedly, of the idea of people just enjoying meeting others that they have not crossed paths with in church.
Yeah.
And you'll have people that have just been going to Grace Pointe for a few months. And we had a class that someone's been there for about 20 years. And just coming together in one class, and that's been really fun. People of different ages and different backgrounds, so it is a neat time to get to know other people.
The only other similar stories I've heard, as far as like the number of years serving in a church or being in a church without doing something, is I've heard of baptism. Some people wait a long time to get baptized, and then the other one is membership. And so it's really neat that we can hear today. Hopefully, those that are listening right now, if you're listening right now, these are the benefits. This is the reason you should become a member. If you hear this, we're waiting for you to come to us. We can help you with the process, and it really is not daunting. Like Becca explained, the booklet itself is kind of like a guided study, really, and it walks you through your history of faith and how you became a Christian. It's not complicated. Hooper, tell us a little bit about your story. You and I were chatting in the hallway the other day, and you kind of glossed over it briefly, and I said, that sounds like a story that we need to hear more in depth.
Yeah, so my wife and myself, we were at a time we were living in Seattle, and so we had two children, Benjamin and Nico, and by virtue sense of my job at the time, I had a different life before coming to student ministry director. I was working in strength and conditioning. They wanted to bring me out to Chicago, and we knew at that time in Seattle that was a really rough time for, I think, just really her and I, in the sense that we were a part of churches, and I really love what Roots Community Church was doing, and they were great, but it was just tough for us because we were commuting a long ways. We weren't really plugged in. We weren't really making the effort on our end, and truthfully on us.
And you both were from the Seattle area.
Born and raised California. We've had some stops along the way.
Okay.
And Seattle at the time. And, it really was on us. And so when this opportunity came out here to come to the Chicagoland area, everybody, I truly mean everyone, was pointing, hey, either go to North Shore or go to Naperville. And we can't afford North Shore. So we went to Naperville. And but even in that, opportunities that God had to open the door for me to stay with a very random family who I appreciate the Tom family. And we, by circumstance, my wife found Grace Pointe, Naperville. Through CBS Bible study, and we started attending.
Sorry, I'll step in here just to clarify. If you're listening right now, the CBS Bible study is a women's group of almost 100 to 150 women that come here on Thursday mornings, and that's exactly what they do. They do a Bible study, they meet, they break into groups, and then they come back and they finish their time together. It's a really neat thing to watch.
Yeah, and they're insanely consistent, which is another huge.
And they run their own sound. They're very gifted.
And so we found, Grace Pointe, and much like had Becca mentioned, we fell in love with the children's ministry and what Dorothy was doing at the time. And we ended up having a family pursue us, one of the elders actually. And we had dinner with them and a couple other families with kids around the same age and everything. And he said one thing that really has stuck with me, and it was, when you drive by this building on Sunday morning, or really anytime, you can either say one or two things. Hey, that's the place I go to on Sunday, or that's my home. And I was like, wow. Like that was such an amazing, just like profound moment that he just said, just off the cuff of his, off the cuff. And I was like, wow, if there's that much,
that's huge
nugget right there. Like how much more is there at this church? Like they're welcoming us, they're pursuing us. We felt wanted and welcomed. And so we really poured into it. And again, recognizing the challenges that we had in Seattle, we jumped full speed into it, and we said, hey, we're not saying no to just about anything. We went to a barbecue and had our first tornado experience. We'd never been in a tornado, and that was fun. And I was so happy we'd had that family and the community there. But even from that, an opportunity opened up for my wife to work at Calvary Christian School through that barbecue. It would have never happened otherwise.
Wow.
And being able to just open ourselves up and be like, yes, we are willing to meet and go into it. And so we fell in love with this community, and we didn't have any family out here. We came out here just us, us four at the time, now five. Yeah. And the love and the, just the hospitality that, this church extended to us. We wanted we were at a point where we felt comfortable, we felt grounded. This has been a couple of years now. And we felt, okay, we want to be able to give that back to other people because we know how much that meant for us.
Yeah.
And so we really looked for people who weren't from, Naperville or Aurora or this area, people who were from out of state. And we tried to be that person they were there for us. Yeah. And so for us, then that's why we became members, because we wanted to be able to serve in a deeper, I don't want to say more meaningful, but like in a deeper capacity, and and kind of open up the doors more for like leadership opportunities and being able to like help, lead other families and be that connection. And so.
And then now you actually serve on staff. How did that come about?
A lot of God. I mean, that's truly the only way.
Because that's a big change from what you were doing to serving as a student ministry director. That's
really
cool.
I mean, in so many ways, and then so many other ways, it hasn't been a change at all, which is a testament to God to be able to use every one of my skills that I've developed in the past 10 years of my last, career and use it for His glory in such a different way. I mean, it was always for His glory, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
And so at the time it was volunteering. So again, we remember. And so I started volunteering with Emerson at the time, the current student pastor, and he just really needed someone to help out, kind of work with junior high kids. And I worked with athletes and students at that age. And so I was like, sure, why not? And fell in love with it, and absolutely just fell in love with it. And after going to camps and being there for about almost 2-3 years then at that point, really felt when the opportunity came up for the open role, really prayed on it and really sat in it, and very paraphrased story, but really felt God was calling me to say, okay, your previous season in life, this chapter is done. It's time to take all these skill sets and let's use it in this new season of life. And it has been an amazing, 7 months now. I preached my first message. Yeah. It's a testament to, when you truly just lean into a community, faith-based community, but then also just really relying on, I don't know what's going to happen, but God, you're bigger than all of this. And even through the tornadoes that we first experienced, we trust in you and the community that you have around us. And it's been life-changing. I truly say life-changing for me.
Sean, you were going to say something?
I was just going to add in kind of sharing, connecting the story of Hooper. And it's just kind of fun, just kind of from seeing it from the other side a little bit. And here he was serving, and he was ministering to my boys. We Reed and Davis were
he's part of that first group
in his groups, and I've always appreciated him just serving. And he was a member then, serving.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was neat. And we went through, as an elder, we went through a process where there was a job opening for a bid, and there were some candidates that came through, and we just didn't feel comfortable with those candidates at that time. We just didn't feel called there. But lo and behold, Hooper was there, and it just wasn't the right timing for him yet. But then all of a sudden he came forth, and there were still other candidates at that point in time.
Wow.
But it was neat to see how God put His hand on Hooper. And but it all came from him being a member, choosing to serve, to be a part of things, and God took things to another place.
You were talking about like the elders not being scary and things like that. One piece that was really fun. So our interview with my wife and I, we had Mick and DeSanto, and he interviewed us way back when, at the time. And right as I'm about to walk up to do my first message here just a couple of weeks ago, I look to my right, and him and his wife are standing right there.
That's cool.
And they were able to pray over me in that moment. And we both,
awesome.
all three of us knew what that moment meant. Without having to say anything, we all knew what that. And it was just such a beautiful moment to say that the elders aren't scary, definitely not scary, but they're still plugged in your life. Like, they're still everyday members. Getting to know Sean, everyday person, it's not scary individuals. So it's been,
From the membership process, what would you say was your favorite part of it?
Mine for sure was the interview. Hearing that story of how Mick has been involved, and even checking in. I've asked him to step in to help lead classes for me for youth ministry, but then like having them check in and having say, how can I pray for you? How can I be there? How can I support you? And it's just always been the light. The book was great. I think for us, we did it during COVID, so the only option was the self-study. So membership class wasn't even a choice for me, at least that we knew about. Could have been also from happenstance of just our life and having multiple children, but I would say it was by far the interview, because I got to ask questions, and I really, I grew up in faith, and I've seen the great pieces. I've seen the red flags of it. And so I got to really ask questions about like, well, how does this church function?
That's a good point. In that interview, you get to ask the questions as well.
Yeah. And then again, growing up in church, and this is not, anything on previous, history there, but, we saw the good, bad, and the ugly. And I got to ask, well, what are your thoughts on this? How would you handle this position? understanding how the structure functions. How does the elder board function, or how do the elders function within the senior pastor, and all these great questions. And it was a really great time because I got to ask it, and there was no sense of, I don't know, animosity, I guess, or maybe the word is. Like, it was just true. Like, they were truly an open book wanting to answer questions.
Sean, I know you've been here for a long time, and you pointed that out earlier, but for you, what was the, I'm laughing right now because Super was laughing at me, so just to be clear. I'm not saying you're old. That's not what I'm saying.
I am old, yeah.
That's not where we're going. I'll just stop digging that hole. So
That's
anyways.
all right. That's all right.
Rewind.
I started young.
Yeah.
It's all my fault.
That's
all my
good.
fault.
Yeah.
What for you, the membership process was similar. I know we chatted earlier. I believe it was a booklet process. At what point for you, when you were attending here, did you make that decision to become a member? And then how did that transition to becoming an elder eventually?
Yeah, great question. So I can unpack a few things here, I guess. That to start, it was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly the workbook and exactly the process, but I do remember we did complete a book, and I think we did more of a self-study. But what I can say as far as getting connected, and I think it was connected first, and then the membership came. But we had an associate pastor here, Mike Cherry. Okay. And at the time, so my wife and I were just married. This was fall of 2001. And at that point in time, we had been coming to the church some, but in fall, Mike, the associate pastor, had seen there was a great class. There was a lot of people in the class, but it was like a young marrieds, but it was more people that had already had kids. And being first married without kids, it's very different. And he noticed that there were a lot of young couples coming in that had not had kids and were just married that summer. So he decided to start this thing called the Young Married Experience. So he and his wife, Karen, opened up their home. It was like 6 weeks or 8 weeks. We just went there every Sunday after church, kind of had lunch together and hung out with these couples. And after that, we started small groups from it. Now, there's a lot of these names I could rattle off from these couples that are at church now. One of them I can remember particularly was this young couple that was just finishing up at Moody, Dan and Sarah Painter.
Wow.
And it was at that point that we got to know them and lots of other wonderful couples at this church and some great lifelong friends. But it was a point that, looking back, was just so special how Mike saw that need, and he brought all these people together. Small groups were created, and a lot of people that are around this church right now that are serving and engaged in things, and some on staff are from that point in time.
Wow.
So that was really neat, and it was really impactful. And these are people we had a small group with as they started, growing families and those things, and having that, those relationships was very special. So throughout time, as far as my personal journey forward, that was kind of how we really got connected. And then my personal journey, and my wife and I became small group leaders throughout that process. Over time, we started a young marrieds class to try to replicate that.
I remember I was in that class. Yep. That was a great class.
Absolutely.
Too.
And to try to replicate that and have small groups come from that and potentially create the same kind of thing. So different things along the way where you just saw needs and you just try to step into those needs and then became an elder throughout different various things that it served in. So.
All right. So we've taken a look at a couple different points of view from people that have joined Grace Pointe, become a member, but also from the staff side of things. Hooper, what would you say would be the benefits of membership?
In youth ministry, at least, I really rely on my leaders a ton. They are essentially mini youth pastors in many cases, like where the students get to know them so personally well and develop really, really great relationships there. And so it's been amazing to see. And I can say this, from my own personal experience, when I was volunteering before I stepped in on the staff, how much I was able to grow my own personal walk. So even as a member, after I've gone through, and yes, we have this kind of process where we all have that same standard, but then kind of, because as I pour into students, I need to be able to receive already. In order to pour out, I have to have poured in already. And so I'm just really encouraged my own personal walk to be in the Word so much, studying, going through Devos, to be prepared for students and be able to prepare to lead, that, honestly, my walk, felt so much more stronger at that time, because I really felt like I had to be. And so it was an encouragement because I knew I had other people relying on me, not only the students, but my also fellow volunteer leads. And I see that time and time again through my current team, who I see, I can pinpoint, from 1 year from previous, how much they've grown in this year's, and, they can really point back to leading and serving. And so being in that capacity.
Yeah, I would just add, as someone not on staff, that moving into membership helps us get out of this mindset of coming to church to receive, even though we inevitably receive so much when we attend church, but we move more into a mindset of coming to church to participate and to serve. And, some people might argue, oh, you don't necessarily have to be a member to be in that mindset. But I do think membership has helped me exponentially move more into that mindset, and to be willing to say yes to more opportunities that come up.
That's a good answer. Sean, once you become a member, is it permanent? Does it require renewal?
Yeah, great question. It continues as long as you're feeling called to be a part of Grace Pointe and the body at Grace Pointe.
Okay.
And it is just, to me, as I touched on earlier, just saying, hey, I'm committing to this body. And committing to the body is meeting together. It's serving together. It's encouraging one another. Just saying I'm committed to that. And it does continue on. Now, there are going to be points in time that God calls people to a different place. Hooper just talked about moving to a different part of the country. Well, there's going to be a point people move away, and at that point, we'd encourage you to get involved in that local church body. Find one that's preaching the Word of God and that the Word is the filter, and they're praying at all times, and some of the core values that we have. But at that point in time, we'd certainly encourage you to transition your membership to that church because you want to be a part of that church body locally.
So I know part of being a member, like I said earlier, was also the benefits of being part of a family, part of attending, part of being a life group. You get that family of the life group, right? And the membership aspects and the benefits of being a member also include others protecting you and reaching out to help you. And there's a ministry here that helps with meals when somebody goes through a job loss or goes through a particularly difficult divorce or whatever it is that they're going through. There's ministries within the church. It's Christ's body helping each other. And it's a really important aspect of membership. You not only get from it, but it gives you an opportunity to give. Much like you serve in the worship team, Becca, there's also the aspect of those that don't sing or don't do instruments, they can cook. Or they have a gift like Hooper, they have a gift to speak with the youth, or they have different gifts of serving others in some important way. Before I get too much into this question here, I know in my life it's been huge. Over the last 10 years, I've gone through my own issues in my own life and things with my kids and my family, and Grace Pointe has really just stepped in and helped us through so much of it in different ways, with meals and helping with babysitting and you name it. They've walked us through so much pain and hurt and stuff that we've been through, and we're now on the other side of this in a position to start to help. Hooper, you mentioned earlier that there is a way that Grace Pointe has reached into your family as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Truly. We came out here just on our own, and I really attribute, honestly, and I know you could say the same thing, the health of our family to this. And I don't want to say, say that lightly. I don't want to say that like in a cliche manner, but it really is like when you don't know a single person and you're trying to raise a family and you're trying to do it, it's hard.
Wow.
It really does take a village to raise a family. When you don't have that, it's hard to find that village. So when you find those people and you find it, and they truly think of meeting needs in ways that I didn't even realize we had, those, ways to be met. And I have families, like you said, bringing, meals to us. And then also always doing it in a way that was just so loving and like no shame whatsoever, and that was like the best part, I think, was that, there was absolutely no shame in the positions that we are in or things that we faced as a family. It was just truly like the health of our family really was.
There was a group of ladies that stepped in for almost 3 months and provided 2 meals a day. And then when that started to phase out, there's one lady from the worship team that stepped in and she said, hey, I was just waiting around for them to finish up because I knew that they had a timeline and everything. So let me know when they're done, and then I'll step in and I can do at least once a week. And I was like, what? Wow, that's huge. So she stepped in and she provided a meal, a dinner each week for a year and a half.
It's amazing.
And it was like, I get teary-eyed thinking about it. Just the heart and the willingness to serve is huge here at Grace Pointe. We had a party recently at our house for those that have helped our family through some of that stuff, and one of the people that came over was a big sister to my daughter. My kids are in the Big Sister, Big Brothers program. And she was listening to the testimony of the people from Grace Pointe that had come over to the party. And I was explaining to them, yep, they did this for this time. And she was helping with babysitting, and this family provided meals and whatnot. She said, wow, I have never heard of a church that does this. I have never heard of a church that reaches out and provides meals like this or provides services in some form. And she walked away that night with a whole new point of view on what ministry and membership and Christ's love for the church really does look like. It was a really neat testimony without even really trying. We had her there to thank her for the love that she was pouring into my daughter. There's so many benefits, not only for yourself, but options and opportunities for you as a new member to give then back to the church in the gifting that God has provided for you as well.
As we touched on, it's a huge benefit because we're following what God's called us to do. And then, like you said, we're having these benefits because we're able to serve others. And there's a joy in that, right? So the others are able to receive that. There's a joy in those giving that. What I would challenge on is everyone, again, if we're all part of the body, to be fully functioning. Can you imagine what things would look like if everybody was serving? And I guess the challenge would be for everybody to pray about, what is God calling you to do? How can you serve? Yes. And as I was processing it a bit, it was, I thought about this Wednesday nights. Okay, Hooper's here. You got the building's hopping on Wednesday nights here in Naperville, right? You've got Awana with the kids. You've got junior high. You've got high school. You've got worship team practice. Yep. The building's hopping. Could you imagine if there's a person that says, hey, there's a lot of things I can't do. I don't have as much time potentially, or I have physical limitations. But what if someone could come here, or they couldn't physically come here, but they could be at home?
Yeah. And
they could just be praying during that time. Yeah. Praying for the kids to come to know Christ, praying for the kids that have received Christ to be bold and courageous in their faith and to share Christ with others. Pray for the leaders to continue to walk with Christ and be good examples. Yes. Pray for safety in the building. And so challenge yourself to pray about, what is God calling you to do? And if God isn't revealing something to you, reach out to the church office, challenge them to be creative, to get to know you and your gifting and find something for you. But I'm thrilled about how Grace Pointe can impact the communities around in Plainfield and Naperville if truly everybody that is part of the body is living as part of the body.
Hooper here, we talked about last night, quite literally last night, in our youth ministry, we do youth group on Wednesday nights. And so within that, games and everything, but we, more importantly, we worship, pray, and then go through a message. And the message we were talking about, what does it look like to be made in the image of God in Imago Dei? And how does that relate to purpose? And I heard this through one of the camps that we went through a couple of years ago. And purpose equals, and this is a bit of an equation, so get out your pen and paper and write it down. But, it's in parentheses, your passions plus the world's problems magnified by God's presence. And think about, our passions. And I think of, even my dad, who, he's an older guy. He can't really walk too much because his lower back pain and surgeries and things like that, but he can drive. And so he's routinely told me, hey, if you ever need anybody to drive a bus, I'm a certified bus driver. I can take my passions and what I'm good at and what God can still use me for in such different ways. So even if it's like a van pool, like, hey, you can't get to church, but I can drive. I got extra space in my chair. Yes. I got an extra spot in my car that's always open. Let that be the calling to say, how do I fill that up? How do I take that person to church, whether it be a student, whether it be, a different ministry, men's, women's, whichever, the young adult experience, not young adult, young married experience. It's amazing when you to think about, just because you aren't, someone who has musically talented or someone who can, like say, can talk with students for, extended periods of time. There's so many more giftings that make a church, function healthy. And like, that's one thing it's been eye-opening to me was even hospitality, having a food mom of the week and having a parent make snacks or bring snacks, go to Dunkin' and buy that. How much, honestly, that's stress off my plate to help that. And then it makes the experience so much better because now students can say, hey, we get Dunkin' Donuts on Wednesday nights, or we get XYZ, we get cookies. I'm going to invite my friend over. And it really is amazing when you start to think about how you can really serve God in so many more non-traditional ways, and air quotations there. Yeah. So,
No doubt. And one of our core values here at Grace Pointe is go to grow. Yes. And it's one of those things that you don't have to be in a perfect state to serve.
Yep.
There are so many things that you can do, like you said, non-traditional things, but you don't have to have arrived to serve. Part of growing is just putting yourself out there and just starting to get engaged.
What options do we have here as far as Grace Pointe, Naperville, or Plainfield, if you can weigh in here, Becca, as far as growing in your faith and engagement? Are there educational or discipleship opportunities available to our members here?
Part of it is starting with, lunch with the pastor. I mean, even then we're encouraging people to get involved and to challenge them in growing. Teaching on Sunday mornings, Dan's messages, right, is encouraging us in that. Emails from Dan and of pastors' encouragement. Hooper, you send out encouragement emails to the youth on things like that. The engagement track you touched on, that's just started this year, but that's all about not a grade on someone to feel like you haven't done something, but just a gauge of, hey, this is where you're at, and to kind of uncover those areas where you do have the opportunity to grow. So that's huge. Things like these podcasts and people sharing stories. Yeah. Dan Painter and I were talking the other day, and just the idea that we're seeing more personal invitation within the church is amazing. And you're seeing people that have only been here for a few weeks, and they're getting invited to small groups or getting invited to classes. And that's huge. So it's not just what the church leadership is doing to help people grow, but it's everybody has the opportunity to help encourage others and help get others connected. And so I thought that was kind of a big one.
I think for me, something that I've realized I need to do better at is show up to church on time so you get those announcements. If you are at church and you hear those announcements, you're not likely to miss what's going on. Yeah. So if there is a missions trip coming up, you're going to hear about it. If there is a new Bible study starting, you're going to hear about it. Yep. That's how I got plugged in with the women's Bible study initially. That's how I learned about becoming a member of the church. So show up to church for the message, but definitely tune into the announcements. I also know at Plainfield, we often have more information set up outside of our sanctuary at a table. There's usually a person standing nearby to ask questions. So if there's ever something that you really just want to know more information about, just go talk to the person who's standing at that table. Take the pamphlet that they have. Sometimes they have a sign-up sheet right there. I know for Christmas carrying in December, there was always tons of information out there and lists of ways that you could serve, and you didn't have to be good at any one particular thing. There were so many different categories that you could look into.
And I know that both websites for Plainfield and Naperville both have our weekly bulletins posted there, which has a ton of information for ways that you can get plugged into.
I believe there's something for everyone, and if there's not, I'd like to hear about it, because then that's something that we need to work towards. But there's men's ministry, there's women's ministry, there's college, there's children's things with the Awanas and Sunday mornings, there's youth things. So I think just about every demographic has something where they can get engaged and connected in. And if you remember, our mission at Grace Pointe is to make as many people as much like Christ in the shortest time possible. And so if we are all called to become more like Jesus, then that is something we want to be engaged in and find ways to make sure we are coming to church, having the opportunity to connect with people, being involved. But that's something that doesn't end. That's something that we're continuing to grow towards. And that's exciting because it's an opportunity to continue to grow.
We had a gal that came up to us and said, I really don't know how to serve. I became a member here. Our family are members. And we want to get plugged in, but I don't sing. I don't know anything technical. I'm not really good at teaching anything, but I love to clean. Is there something that I can, is there anything that I can do that I can clean and so they got her plugged in, actually specialty cleaning the stage, because we have a crew that comes through here and cleans the building, but they don't really do much with the stage. So usually that falls on the worship pastor or his team to kind of do it as you move things around up there. You're kind of cleaning, but she would come in with her and her daughters, and they would go from one side of the stage to the other with their dust rags and their vacuum cleaner, and they would do a top to bottom clean of that thing, and it would look spick and span clean. So it's things like that. Like, everybody has something to give. You just have to want to step up and offer that service, and it's that growth opportunity.
And if anyone has a specialty of cleaning youth rooms, let me know, dhooper@gpmail. Just truly.
There's always been a special smell down there, I think.
Yeah, I just think, on serving, like we touched on, how important it is. And there are various things that people can do. It's not for someone to be overwhelmed. We understand there are different seasons in life. There are different things that people have going on, and there are different seasons that you can serve to different degrees, but we can still pray for others, and there are certain things that we can do, even if seemingly small, are still very impactful. And so I guess that's the challenge is, again, it's still the opportunity to serve, but I don't want people to feel pressure that they have to serve at some level or to some degree, but just try to be engaged and see what God's calling you to do at that moment. And something may be different in a different season of time.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
If anybody listening to this podcast is interested in being a member, we'd love to partner with you in that. I would recommend in Plainfield, if you're interested in doing that, reach out to Dennis Colton, the campus pastor, or grab one of the elders. In Naperville, we have a new discipleship pastor, Rick Pearson. Feel free to reach out to him or reach out to one of the elders, and we'd be happy to connect you and start you on that journey.
That was really well said, John, though. I really do, yeah. Because I think of, Rob Lewis, who's grown up in this church. He's been a mainstay in youth ministry, but he stepped into a position where he started a new job as a firefighter at a different city, and so he had to pull back. And it was a really hard conversation because Rob's a rock star in youth ministry, but it was an opportunity where it's like he had to focus on this other area in his life, and it was great. And we still found ways to plug in we were able to meet him where he was at, so he still taught for us like once every now and then, which was great because he was still plugged in. But it's like, I agree, like you don't have to be overwhelmed. If this is a tough season, talk to people.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it was neat to see even, his brother, James, I'd just done a membership interview with he and his wife, and it was great to meet him. And I shouldn't say meet him. I remember him as a youth when he was here younger. They had gone away and come back, and getting to see him as an adult and getting to know him there. And then all of a sudden, just a few weeks later, he's helping out in the youth group. I'm like, this is amazing. And here it was, getting to sit with him and his wife, and then now he's helping guide my son. So it's pretty fun how that works.
Well, we've covered a lot of info today, but most importantly, I think you've all helped establish why membership at church is so crucial in someone's Christian walk. Sean, you did a fantastic job outlining earlier on how to become a member. Thank you as well for taking time to meet and share the foundations of what membership is and why it's important. We also have a ton of information on our website at gpn.church/membership as well, so you can check us out there. And like I said earlier, too, at the intro, the 4 Gs are up at the top of our website. If you want to navigate through there, click on any of them, figure out what areas you want to get plugged into here at Grace Pointe, or under the Gather, there's the membership link. You can click there if you want to become a member, and there's a whole lot of information there. But Becca as well, thank you so much for your time today with 4 kids. I know you're a very busy mama. And Hooper, thank you for joining us as well. I'm Dan Royal. Thank you for listening to the GP Podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please make sure to both recommend this podcast to a friend and come back to our next podcast episode on the GP Podcast.